growing up, I was always a very intelligent little girl. I would have people commenting a lot about my intelligence, and oftentimes I'd have people telling me things like, "You're too young to have that opinion," or "You're too young to have an opinion on that." And that kind of carried through and has caused a lot of emotional issues and personal development issues, but that's not exactly the reason why being intelligent and being a gifted student ruined my life. So, growing up, I never struggled in school. I never really had to study. I don't think I ever spent more than an hour on my homework. And I just thought that was normal. I had no idea that other people were less capable of doing their schoolwork than I was, or that they struggled to understand the concepts more than I did. So there was no bragging power behind it as far as I was concerned, because I just figured everybody was the same way. And then I switched over to middle school, where I actually got a little bit more of a standardized schooling structure going on, and found out that yes, I am in fact in the upper percentage of intelligent children. However, I was never willing to put in the work in order to be the top student, nor do I honestly think that I could have been, because there were some very, very intelligent people in my class. But all things considered, I was still able to pretty much skate through without much work, without much effort whatsoever. And this isn't to say that my parents didn't try to instill a work ethic in me. They would talk about how you need to put in the effort in order to get the results. But for me, the amount of work required to get positive results in school was extremely minimal. And that's where things got really challenging after the school years finished. Because when you step into real life, most of the things that you learn in school aren't going to be useful. Unless you are specifically going into a field like scientific research or becoming an engineer, a lot of the math that you learn is not going to be relevant at all, particularly once you get beyond Algebra 1. Even geometry is pretty much pointless at this point. So a lot of these skills that I learned so easily, and all of these things that I'm able to debate with people, I'm able to keep up in philosophical discussions, and I have strong opinions about things, and I have philosophies of my own. These are all things that are fun and great about being highly intelligent. However, because I never learned to put in the work, because I never learned how hard life could be, when I entered adulthood and started, working for a living and started trying to create something from my life, I did not have the willingness or the understanding that it would take more work than generally I thought to accomplish something. And I was always the child who wanted to start a business. That was probably the only job I ever really wanted. And the reason for that is because my dad has always been a very, very hard worker, but he's never home. He was a computer programmer, and he's a good one. He's very good at his job. And because of that, he was essentially called upon for every emergency that the company had, and he would wind up working ridiculously long hours, and he'd never be home, and even when he did have time off, he was usually out golfing or something like that. So I basically never saw my dad. And then when he'd say to me, "Well, you grow up, you could get a job like this, and you could have a life like me," and I was like, "Dear God, no, I am not going to have a life like you," because I never wanted to be separate from my family the way that I viewed him as. So I never really necessarily wanted a family per se. I have one now, but I always was invested in relationships. And one of the big reasons for that was because I actually lost somebody really, really close to me when I was 7, and that put me into a state of depression, but it shaped a lot of who I am now. But essentially, I knew from that time that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, that I wanted to own a business, that I wanted to create something that would last. I wanted to have an impact on the world, and I wanted to have the time to spend with the people I cared about. So I decided, hey, I'm going to go start businesses. And I tried over and over and over and over again. And I'd usually start a business, go about 6 months in, not see any results, and then be like, well, clearly this is the wrong business for me. And then I'd try something else. And I don't know how many different business models I've tried. I've gone with, writing books. I've tried creating courses. I've tried selling network marketing products. I've tried creating a marketing agency. I've tried selling on Etsy. I've tried creating Shopify stores. I've done web development. There's all sorts of things that I've gone into and tried to build a business out of. And the reality of the situation is now, looking back, had I stuck with any of those businesses, I could have succeeded. But because I didn't understand the necessity of hard work and persistence, I kept quitting. So in many ways, I regret my lack of understanding about work ethic, because had I understood that at the time, I probably would be a millionaire by now. But now I'm about a year or so into building a business, and it's still, not exactly working out the way that I want it to, but I know the only way forward is to keep pushing now. And it's taken probably 15 to 20 different business ventures for me to actually figure that out. And I think this is something that pretty much any gifted student is going to deal with to some extent. I know my husband certainly has as well, where when he finds things to be difficult, he's like, well, clearly this is not my skill. This is not my talent. And it's still something I struggle with even now, even knowing that usually it's going to take longer and that you have to be persistent and you have to keep learning and you have to keep trying. I still think, well, clearly I'm horrible at this. Clearly this is not for me. When the reality is the comments I get, even on YouTube, are really positive, where people are like, you are a very good speaker. You are very articulate, despite the fact that I just tripped over a word. You are really good at putting your thoughts together. You have really great insights. These are comments that I receive, and I even have people telling me, hey, I think you're going to blow up on YouTube in no time. And I'm like, hasn't happened yet. I guess we'll see. I don't know which video is going to do it, but I'll keep trying. So this is the new path that I'm following, and for the first time in my life, I am learning the value of hard work. But that's a lot of programming to overcome. So I know that there are a lot of you guys who probably did struggle in school, who had to study for hours every single night to figure out this stuff, and you still barely pass the classes. And I would say, don't feel so bad, because honestly, you were taught how to keep pushing even when things were difficult, for minimal returns, which honestly is what most of life is. And that is something that us intelligent children never learned. You learned how to be practical, you learned how to get the job done, and you're probably much better off than any of us who are able to talk you into a hole are ever going to be. And you're probably further ahead than, and it'll take a while for the rest of us to catch up with you. So this is the reason why Robert Kiyosaki says that A students work for B students, because the B students did enough to get by, but then they also had the creativity to try other things, whereas the A students just followed the rules and still got good grades. So B students and below, you probably learned skills that us in the upper echelon of academics never did. And I think you guys are in a much, much better situation. So if you're like me and you're somebody who is gifted and very intelligent, I understand, I get it. There's a certain level of arrogance, I think, that's involved in being intelligent until you realize just how idiotic you are compared to all the practical people out there. I know that my husband's kind of dealing with that right now. I, however, have been humbled many, many times and realized how dumb I am. So I may be able to get A's on tests, but there is very little that I actually know, it seems like. Although I'm pretty good at helping people work through their stuff, which is why I went into life coaching in the first place. But all things considered, yeah, it's taken a long time to unlearn this particular idea that life should be easy and that I shouldn't have to work at things. And that is kind of an entitled attitude that is probably one of the main reasons that most of us in the millennial age and younger are struggling with. So it is going to be more work. It is going to be harder. And you have to know that. And if you don't know that, you will eventually, because you'll keep hitting your head against the wall in some fashion until you learn it. But hopefully, by watching this video, you'll at least get the idea and understand that life is not going to be easy all the time, and that you do actually have to learn that work ethic.